Nestled in the remote countryside, far from the bustle of city life, stood a charming old farmhouse advertised on Airbnb. The listing promised a tranquil escape with rustic charm, surrounded by lush forests and rolling hills. Intrigued by the picturesque photos and glowing reviews, Alex and Emily, a couple seeking a peaceful retreat, booked the farmhouse for a week-long vacation. As they drove through winding roads to reach the farmhouse, the scenery grew increasingly desolate. Tall, dense trees lined the path, and the sky seemed perpetually overcast, casting a gloomy shadow over the landscape. When they finally arrived, the farmhouse stood alone, its weathered facade and creaky wooden porch adding to its eerie charm. Upon entering, they were greeted by a cozy interior filled with antique furniture, quaint decorations, and a large stone fireplace. The host had left a welcome note with a bottle of wine and a basket of homemade goodies, making them feel instantly at home. Despite the farmhouse's charm, there was an underlying sense of unease that neither could quite shake. The first night passed without incident, though the wind howling through the trees and the occasional creak of the house kept Alex and Emily on edge. The next day, they explored the surrounding area, hiking through the dense woods and enjoying the natural beauty. But as dusk approached, they couldn't help but notice the forest seemed to grow darker, the shadows longer, and an almost palpable sense of being watched. That evening, as they settled in for dinner by the fireplace, they heard a faint knocking sound. At first, they dismissed it as the house settling, but the knocking persisted, growing louder and more insistent. Alex decided to investigate, but found nothing amiss. As he returned to the living room, Emily pointed out an old, faded photograph on the mantelpiece that neither of them had noticed before. It depicted a family standing in front of the farmhouse, their expressions solemn and eyes seemingly lifeless. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, the knocking resumed, this time accompanied by faint whispers. The whispers were indistinct, but the tone was undeniably sinister. They came from all directions, making it impossible to pinpoint their source. Alex and Emily huddled together, their fear mounting. In the dead of night, Emily woke to find Alex standing by the window, staring out into the darkness. His eyes were vacant, and he didn't respond when she called his name. She shook him, and he snapped out of his trance, bewildered and frightened. He had no memory of getting up or what he had been looking at. They decided to leave the bedroom light on for the rest of the night, but sleep eluded them. The next day, they explored the farmhouse more thoroughly, hoping to uncover the source of the disturbances. In the attic, they found old, dusty trunks filled with family heirlooms, yellowed letters, and more photographs. The letters spoke of strange occurrences, illnesses, and unexplained disappearances that plagued the family who once lived there. It seemed the farmhouse had a dark history, one that Airbnb reviews conveniently omitted. Determined to leave, Alex and Emily packed their bags, but as they tried to open the front door, it wouldn't budge. The windows were similarly stuck, trapping them inside. Panic set in as the knocking and whispers grew louder, more insistent. Desperate, they called the Airbnb host, but the call wouldn't go through. It was as if they were cut off from the outside world. That night, the disturbances reached a terrifying crescendo. The whispers turned into screams, echoing through the house. Shadows moved on their own, taking on grotesque human-like forms. The air grew icy cold, and an oppressive force seemed to press down on them. In the chaos, Alex and Emily huddled together, trying to stay sane as the house around them seemed to come alive with malevolent intent. In a moment of clarity, Alex remembered the fireplace. They had read stories about spirits being bound to certain objects or places. Hoping the fireplace might hold the key, they frantically searched for anything that might help. Behind the mantelpiece, they discovered a hidden compartment containing an old, charred diary. The diary belonged to the matriarch of the family and detailed the tragic events that led to their downfall. A pact made with dark forces in a desperate attempt to save their ailing child. The price had been their souls, bound to the farmhouse for eternity. With no other option, Alex and Emily decided to burn the diary, hoping to break the curse. As the flames consumed the pages, the house shook violently, and the screams reached a deafening pitch. The shadows writhed and twisted before dissipating into nothingness. The front door suddenly swung open, and the oppressive force lifted. Exhausted and terrified, Alex and Emily fled the farmhouse, not stopping until they reached the nearest town. They reported their experience to the authorities, but when they returned with the police, the farmhouse was gone, leaving behind only an overgrown clearing. There was no trace of the house that had once stood there, as if it had never existed. Shaken and scarred by their ordeal, Alex and Emily vowed never to speak of the farmhouse again. They left a final review on Airbnb, warning others of the horrors they had faced. But like all the others before it, the review mysteriously disappeared within hours. To this day, they wonder if the farmhouse still stands somewhere, waiting for its next unsuspecting guest to arrive. In a quaint coastal town known for its picturesque views and charming B&Bs, there existed a particular Airbnb listing that seemed perfect for a serene weekend getaway. The listing boasted a cozy cottage perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, with stunning sunsets and the soothing sound of waves crashing against the rocks below. Enticed by the description and glowing reviews, Emma, a young professional seeking a much-needed break from her hectic city life, booked her stay without hesitation. Upon arrival, Emma was greeted by the sight of the idyllic cottage, exactly as described in the listing. The exterior was covered in ivy, and a narrow path led from the doorstep to a private beach below. However, as she approached the door, she couldn't shake a sense of unease. The key was in the usual spot under the flower pot, just as the host had mentioned, but the door seemed reluctant to open, as if resisting her entry. Once inside, Emma found the interior cozy and inviting, albeit with a faint musty smell that hinted at the cottage's age. She unpacked her bags and decided to explore the surroundings before settling in for the night. The private beach was as beautiful as the photos had promised, but the atmosphere felt strangely oppressive, and she couldn't help but feel like she was being watched. As dusk fell, Emma returned to the cottage. She made herself a light dinner and settled down with a book by the fireplace. The wind outside had picked up, causing the old cottage to creak and groan. Trying to brush off her growing unease, she decided to go to bed early. The bedroom was quaint with antique furniture and a large window that offered a panoramic view of the sea. In the middle of the night, Emma was abruptly awakened by a loud crash. Heart pounding, she grabbed her phone for light and cautiously made her way downstairs. To her shock, she found the front door wide open, swaying in the wind. She knew she had locked it before going to bed. She shut the door, double-checked the lock, and chalked it up to the wind. But sleep didn't come easily after that. The next day, Emma decided to explore the town and speak to some locals, hoping to shake off the lingering feeling of dread. At a small cafe, she struck up a conversation with an elderly woman who seemed to know everyone and everything about the town. When Emma mentioned where she was staying, the woman's cheerful demeanor darkened. "You're staying at the old Wilkins cottage?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Yes, why?" Emma replied, suddenly apprehensive. The woman leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "That place has a history. The Wilkins family used to live there, but they disappeared one night, never to be seen again. Some say the place is cursed, haunted by their spirits. Strange things happen there." Emma laughed nervously. "Haunted? Really?" The woman nodded solemnly. "Many who have stayed there report feeling uneasy, seeing shadows, hearing voices. Be careful, my dear." Trying to dismiss the conversation as mere superstition, Emma returned to the cottage. That night, as she tried to sleep, she couldn't shake the old woman's words from her mind. The wind howled outside, and the creaks of the old cottage seemed louder than ever. She felt a presence in the room with her, but every time she turned on the light, she found nothing. The following night, the disturbances escalated. Emma was awakened by a chilling whisper right next to her ear. "Get out!" She bolted upright, her heart racing. She grabbed her phone and used the flashlight to scan the room. In the corner, she saw a shadowy figure, indistinct but unmistakably there. Her blood ran cold as the figure seemed to glide towards her, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. Terrified, Emma fled the bedroom, but the oppressive presence seemed to follow her. She ran downstairs, nearly tripping in her haste, and tried to open the front door, but it wouldn't budge. Desperate, she turned back to see the shadowy figure standing at the top of the stairs, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. In a panic, Emma ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife, hoping to defend herself. But as she turned back, the figure was gone. The air felt heavy, and a deep, mournful wail echoed through the cottage. It sounded like multiple voices crying out in agony. Determined to escape, Emma tried the door again. This time it swung open effortlessly. She sprinted outside into the cold night, not stopping until she reached her car. She drove to the nearest hotel and spent the night there, too shaken to sleep. The next day, she contacted the Airbnb host, who seemed unfazed by her account of the events. "You're not the first guest to leave early," he said cryptically, "but you're safe now." Emma left a detailed review, warning others about her experience, but it was mysteriously removed within hours. She later discovered that the cottage continued to be listed, with new guests checking in regularly, unaware of its dark history. To this day, Emma can't forget the chilling experience she had at the Wilkins cottage. She often wonders what became of the family that vanished, and whether their restless spirits still roam the halls, waiting for the next unsuspecting guest to arrive.